about something unknown, so it has nothing to do with pigs at all, but the newspaper ignores that fact, which is the WHO itself has admitted, saying it has nothing to do with the pigs. The swine flu virus appeared in April at the same time as President Obama visited Mexico City, when the corporate media's full attention was already directed on that city. When we're talking about gaining the public's attention, we're really talking about gaining the attention of the cameras, and the way to do that, of course, is to provide good visuals, a good stage cast. The president is there, top-level negotiations, and so on. The swine flu virus made a dramatic entrance on the World Theatre. A museum director who met Obama, Felipe Solis, died the very next day, according to a report in Bloomberg. However, President Obama himself never took a test to see whether he had the swine flu virus, which seems rather strange considering how allegedly lethal and easily to catch this virus is. Some Mexican doctors have said that Mexico was actually the victim of a bioterrorist attack at that time. Anyway, the story of the media is that this virus overwhelmed the impoverished, overpopulated city, then the country. It brought the nation's health care delivery system to the verge of collapse, and it necessitated the drastic measure of putting the whole of Mexico City under quarantine. So the people there were cut off from food and water for 7 days, and there were riots as a result of that in April. We're told that the virus leapt across borders, it made its way to Canada and then to America, and now we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and it's engulfed Scotland, and 48 people have died from it. We're told that it's going to be, or could be, worse than the Spanish flu, which killed approximately 25% of the US population and as many 115 million people, especially US soldiers and the Navy. So watch out, US soldiers and the Navy, because we know that you're going to be the target for this time round. And we're constantly told by the mainstream media that this pandemic poses an overwhelming health management problem that can only be solved with the help of bodies like WHO and the EU and the UN. And we're told that the governments have been good enough to think about preparing for this, and they have prepared a mass vaccination program for us all, and that martial law may even be necessary to ensure that essential services don't break down as a result of the large numbers of dead people and absenteeism. And we're told that forced vaccinations and even quarantines will help prevent the spread of the disease. We're also told that the vaccines are tested and safe, and especially they're to be recommended for pregnant women and children. So basically, what the media is telling you bears no relationship at all to the facts if you actually go and do the research. But we're in a radically new media environment where reports don't need to have any basis in fact at all. They just have to create the emotional atmosphere that makes people believe there's a pandemic. They just have to construct a plausible narrative that allows radical change in the form of new control mechanisms to be imposed on populations. The swine flu pandemic is designed and intended for the CEN and BBC cameras, and it's designed for an audience to build a consensus for mass vaccinations, for the need to close down borders, and for the need to a more centralized government and even the deployment of the military. If you look at what has happened with the swine flu, you can see that the media has become a vital instrument in the gigantic fraud that is the swine flu scam. The centralized control of the corporate media is shown by the way the media outlets in every single European country and also in the USA are all giving exactly the same narrative, almost at the same time or each day. If I read German and a bit of French, and I can see how the same information appears in Germany and France, in America at the same time. For example, there was the story about how the vaccines had suddenly there was a shortage of the vaccines. This myth that there wasn't enough. And this appeared at the same time in every single country. But it's not only with the swine flu that science is being misused for political and financial purposes with the assistance of the mainstream media. Leaked emails from the University of East Anglia have revealed how raw data about the world's temperature is being systematically manipulated to suggest global warming is man-made when there is actually no evidence for this at all. This data was fed directly into the UN's IPCC reports and is the basis for the perceived need to cut carbon emissions by imposing drastic new carbon taxes to be collected by the IMF under the direction of the UN. And the 9/11 is another example of a media-crafted event. Architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth have presented very convincing evidence to show that the Twin Towers could not possibly have been destroyed by the hijacked planes. The steel and concrete towers could only have been destroyed by explosives inside the buildings. Nevertheless, the destruction of these towers was necessary for the invasion of the Afghanistan to regain control of the heroin and also of the Iraq and the oil fields, and to justify an increase in the price of oil. The role of the media in constructing the 9/11 myth is shown by the way the BBC reported on the collapse of the third tower 20 minutes or more before the tower actually fell down. It was still visible in the background as the reporter was talking. In the virtual reality created by the media sphere, cause and effect can be inverted or just obscured, as is the case with the current financial crisis, which is the result of banks systematically withdrawing 1/3 of the money from circulation. This results in bankruptcies and economic collapse, and banks which have just received huge sums of money from the taxpayers in the form of bailouts can then go on a shopping spree and buy up all these things on the cheap. And by the time this economic collapse is over, they'll probably own 90% of all the assets in the Western world. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, once you've robbed people on this scale, and we are only just beginning to see the effects of the financial crisis, many people think this could be far worse than the 1930s. We could see states, countries going bankrupt, people not getting, their pensions paid out, their salaries paid out of their government officials. Once you rob people on this scale, you've got a big problem in your hands, because they're going to get very angry and they could well rebel and revolt, and they could go out and lynch the whole parliament and the banksters. And this is why I believe the swine flu pandemic has been timed to coincide with the economic collapse. We can see, in fact, how a number of these, plots are all being timed to work or to come together at the same time. The UN taking control of economies through the Copenhagen Treaty, WHO of the health and military through the swine flu pandemic, so that just as the economy begins to collapse, this group of people have their control grid in place. And of course the EU is another major factor in this control grid. Now, the problem they're facing is that the independent media is spreading information and doing it very, very effectively. More and more people are getting to become aware of the fact that the reason why their lives are so difficult and probably going to get even worse is not because of all these impersonal forces that are working out there, but because a tiny group of people have planned for them to have very miserable lives and determined to make them more miserable. And spread of this knowledge is becoming a great threat to the New World Order. We see in Europe people are not taking the swine flu vaccine. The take-up rate in Germany is about 3 or 4%. In France, I think 2 million out of 65 million people have taken it. In Switzerland, it's gone down to 12 or 10%, down from 70% at the beginning of summer. So people are really wising up to what's going on. And the media is no longer able to have the same effect that it used to have. the New World Order has actually used the mainstream